Today, we're exploring the key ideas from Feeling Good by Burns M.D., David D. This is an independent educational overview, enriched with our own integrative analysis and actionable exercises. Think of it as a guided reflection to spark your own insights, not a replacement for reading the book itself. The human experience, for all its potential for joy and connection, is often shadowed by profound emotional distress, chief among them the pervasive weight of depression. Despite advances in pharmacological interventions, the underlying currents of despair, self-harm, and even suicide continue to rise, touching lives across all demographics. Yet, amidst this somber reality, a powerful message of hope and liberation emerges. Emotional suffering is not an escapable fate. It is, instead, a surmountable challenge, one that can be addressed through accessible, learnable techniques that empower individuals to fundamentally reshape their inner world. At the heart of this transformative approach lies cognitive therapy, a methodology developed and rigorously refined at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. Born from a dissatisfaction with the often slow and insufficient outcomes of traditional treatments, this new paradigm posits a revolutionary yet profoundly intuitive truth. Our moods are not arbitrary, but direct consequences of our thoughts. Every emotion, every wave of sadness or anxiety, every flicker of self-doubt is meticulously crafted by our internal narratives, our perceptions, beliefs, and interpretations of events. When depression takes hold, it casts a dark, distorting filter over these internal processes, warping reality into a bleak, hopeless panorama. Crucially, these negative thoughts, though they feel utterly real and convincing, are almost universally distortions, irrational, illogical, and fundamentally untrue. The profound implication of this insight is liberating. By learning to identify and systematically dismantle these mental distortions, individuals gain the power to manage their moods, elevate their self-esteem, and forge a path toward lasting emotional well-being. This is not a fleeting trend, but a scientifically validated approach now integral to mainstream psychological practice, offering practical tools for self-mastery. The architecture of emotional distress, unmasking the mind's deceptions. At its core, emotional anguish, particularly depression, is less a disorder of feeling and more a profound disruption in thinking. Our internal emotional barometer, rather than being an independent entity, is inextricably linked to the stories we tell ourselves about our experiences and about our very being. When this internal narrative becomes tainted by depression, it doesn't just feel bad, it profoundly alters our perception of reality. Simple missteps become monumental failures, past joys appear as fleeting illusions, and the future looms as an unending tunnel of despair. This automatic, often subconscious, cascade of negative thoughts, or cognitions, is the true architect of our distress, rendering us lethargic, convinced of our inadequacy, and isolated within our own minds. These cognitive distortions are so deeply ingrained, so habitual, that they feel like an authentic reflection of reality. Yet, they are merely mental static, twisting our perception and generating an abnormal emotional response. Imagine a sculptor, convinced they are a total failure because one small detail on a statue is not absolutely perfect. This is an example of all-or-nothing thinking, a common distortion where personal qualities and performances are judged in extreme black or white terms. A single imperfection is equated with complete inadequacy, leading to crippling self-condemnation. Similarly, after a minor setback, like a missed deadline, an individual might fall into overgeneralization, concluding, "I'll always fail, nothing I start ever succeeds." This transforms a single negative event into an endless pattern of defeat. Another insidious trap is the mental filter, where an individual fixates on a single negative detail, allowing it to overshadow the entire picture. A painter, for instance, might create a beautiful landscape but obsess only over a tiny, almost imperceptible smudge, letting it darken their entire perception of the artwork's worth. Even more destructive is disqualifying the positive, actively rejecting compliments or successes by inventing reasons why they don't count. A student who aces an exam might dismiss it as pure luck or an easy test, effectively turning a triumph into a non-event, preventing any positive emotional impact. The mind also has a knack for jumping to conclusions. This can manifest as mind reading, where one assumes others are silently judging them negatively without evidence, or the fortune teller error, predicting a dire outcome for an event and treating this prediction as an established fact. Consider a person walking into a party, convinced everyone is thinking, they look awkward. Or another who, before a job interview, tells themselves, I'm going to botch this entirely, I just know it. These leaps of thought, devoid of actual proof, create unnecessary anxiety and fear. Magnification and minimization are like emotional binoculars, blowing up errors out of proportion while shrinking strengths. A minor oversight at work becomes a catastrophe, while a significant accomplishment is shrugged off as no big deal. Emotional reasoning asserts that because one feels something, it must be true. I feel worthless, therefore I am worthless, is a classic example. Yet emotions are merely reflections of our thoughts, not objective facts. Then there are the rigid should statements. Self-imposed rules like, I should always be cheerful, or others must always be fair. When these dictates aren't met, they generate guilt, resentment, or anger. A parent might feel immense guilt, believing they should never lose their temper, despite the natural frustrations of child-rearing. Labeling and mislabeling is an extreme form of overgeneralization, branding oneself a loser after a mistake, rather than acknowledging a specific error. Finally, personalization involves taking undue responsibility for external events, believing that if a group project fails, it's solely my fault, even when others were equally involved. These distortions, powerful in their ability to persuade, create a false reality, leading to intense self-condemnation and emotional paralysis. The path to relief begins by recognizing these illusions and systematically challenging their deceptive hold. Rebuilding the self, from paralysis to purpose. When the mind is steeped in distorted thinking, it not only conjures debilitating moods, but also systematically dismantles the very foundation of self-worth. Depression frequently brings with it the crushing conviction of inherent worthlessness, a belief that deepens with the severity of suffering. This feeling is not a reflection of reality, but a symptom of the distorted lens through which one perceives oneself, leading to an erosion of self-esteem that transforms minor flaws into symbols of global failure. A person might mistakenly believe that external achievements, looks, or social approval are the only pathways to worth, leading to a precarious pseudo-esteem that crumbles with any setback. True self-worth, however, cannot be earned. It simply is, an intrinsic value that remains constant regardless of circumstances. To cultivate this internal self-esteem, the cognitive approach guides individuals to systematically reevaluate their negative self-image. The first step involves actively talking back to the inner critic. When self-degrading thoughts arise, I'm such an idiot for making that mistake, they are immediately recognized, written down, and the specific cognitive distortion identified. Perhaps it's all-or-nothing thinking or labeling. Then a rational, objective rebuttal is crafted and written out. This isn't about forced positivity, but about uncovering the actual truth, which often reveals the original thought as illogical and unfair. Through consistent practice of this triple column technique, one learns to disarm the internal persecutor. Supplementing this, mental biofeedback uses a simple counter to track negative self-thoughts, bringing awareness and, over time, a measurable reduction in their frequency. Beyond internal dialogue, the battle against depression often involves confronting do-nothingism, a paralyzing inertia that amplifies feelings of inadequacy. This isn't laziness or a hidden desire for suffering. It stems from a complex web of distorted thoughts. A person might feel hopeless that any action will matter, helpless that their mood is beyond control, or overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of tasks. The key insight here is that motivation often follows action rather than preceding it. Even small, deliberate steps can break the cycle of inertia and cultivate a sense of mastery. Techniques like the daily activity schedule involve planning and then rating activities for mastery and pleasure, providing tangible evidence of accomplishment and challenging beliefs in incapability. The anti-procrastination sheet directly confronts daunting tasks by breaking them into small steps, predicting difficulty and reward, and then comparing these predictions to actual outcomes, often revealing how inaccurate pessimistic forecasts are. For those feeling overwhelmed, Little Steps for Little Feet breaks any task into its minutest components, making it manageable. Instead of, I need to write a whole report, it becomes, I will open the document for 5 minutes. Self-imposed shoulds and oughts can create resentment, so motivation without coercion encourages reframing these as wants or advantages, fostering a sense of free choice. The tick-tock technique involves identifying task-interfering cognitions, tics, like this is too hard, and replacing them with task-oriented cognitions, talks, such as I can try one small part. Finally, self-endorsement combats the tendency to dismiss accomplishments by consciously giving credit for every action, no matter how small, building self-esteem by focusing on what has been done. These behavioral strategies, integrated with thought challenging, empower individuals to reclaim agency. Emotional mastery extends beyond self-esteem and action to encompass other debilitating emotions. Anger, like all emotions, is born from our interpretations. When faced with criticism, our automatic thoughts often magnify, overgeneralize, or label, leading to disproportionate upset. Verbal judo provides a method to disarm critics by first seeking to understand their perspective with empathy, then finding a grain of truth to agree with, and finally, calmly stating one's own position. This avoids defensiveness and preserves self-worth. Similarly, guilt is dismantled by distinguishing it from healthy remorse. Guilt arises when one believes a bad action makes them an inherently bad person, often fueled by distortions like labeling or personalization. Remorse, by contrast, is a realistic regret for a specific action, prompting learning and change without self-condemnation. By focusing on empathetic understanding and problem-solving rather than self-flagellation, these destructive emotions can be transformed into opportunities for growth. Beyond symptom relief, cultivating lasting resilience. Genuine recovery from emotional distress transcends the mere cessation of symptoms. It demands a deeper understanding of the forces that initially bred the turmoil and a proactive strategy for preventing its recurrence. Feeling better is a welcome reprieve, but true getting better involves identifying and disarming the silent assumptions that often lurk beneath conscious thought, serving as triggers for future vulnerability. These deep-seated beliefs function as equations defining personal worth, shaping our value systems, and predisposing us to mood swings. For instance, the implicit belief, if I am criticized, it means something is fundamentally wrong with me, or my self-worth hinges entirely on my achievements, creates a psychological Achilles heel. Unearthing these silent assumptions is crucial. The vertical arrow method involves taking an upsetting automatic thought, imagining it's true, and then repeatedly asking, if this were true, what would it mean to me? Why would it be so upsetting? This persistent inquiry drills down through layers of superficial thoughts to expose the core, often illogical, assumptions driving distress. For example, if someone thinks, "I made a mistake at work," asking, "What would that mean?" might lead to, "I'll be fired." Asking again, "And what would that mean?" might reveal, "Then I'll be a total failure." And finally, "What would that mean?" might expose the silent assumption, "My worth as a human being is tied directly to my job performance and success." This method, like a Socratic dialogue with oneself, brings objective clarity to deeply buried beliefs. Many of these vulnerabilities stem from what can be termed addictions to external validation. The approval addiction roots self-esteem in the opinions of others, rendering an individual exquisitely sensitive to criticism. The paradox is that external praise only elevates mood if one internally validates it. A critical comment from another person reflects their opinion, not an objective truth about one's inherent worth. An individual might believe that a partner's minor disagreement means they are inherently unlovable, demonstrating this dependence. Similarly, the love addiction posits that true happiness is impossible without romantic affection. This dependency often leads to self-pity and repels the very connection it craves. Learning to cultivate internal joy and self-care transforms being alone from a curse into an opportunity for personal fulfillment, often making one more attractive to others. The achievement addiction equates self-worth directly with accomplishments. While seeming to fuel motivation, this path often leads to burnout, constant anxiety, and deep despair if productivity wanes or setbacks occur. A person might feel utterly worthless if they lose their job, viewing themselves as a discarded tin can. Challenging this involves recognizing that inherent human worth is not earned, it simply exists, independent of external metrics. This frees energy from a relentless, often joyless pursuit of external validation, redirecting it toward meaningful, present living. Perfectionism is another self-defeating silent assumption, setting impossible standards that guarantee perpetual disappointment. The radical notion of daring to be average serves as a liberating antidote. By intentionally lowering standards in various activities, one often finds that performance improves and satisfaction, surprisingly, increase. It also involves understanding that mistakes are not failures, but essential signposts for learning and growth. To err is human. To embrace imperfection is to embrace life itself. Finally, the most profound test of resilience involves confronting suicidal thoughts, a common and gravely serious symptom of severe depression. These thoughts are almost always rooted in a distorted, pervasive belief that life is an inescapable nightmare and that the future holds only unending pain. This absolute hopelessness, a symptom of the illness itself, leads to the false conviction that suicide is the only escape. The vital truth to grasp is that this belief is illogical and fundamentally mistaken. Assessing suicidal risk involves distinguishing passive death wishes from active plans. Critically, hopelessness is not a factual prognosis, but a symptom that signals a profound need for treatment. By systematically exposing the twisted thoughts and faulty assumptions that generate this hellish illusion, the urge to live can reemerge, providing the space for real-world problem-solving and profound personal growth. This journey from despair to living is not about finding answers to insoluble problems, but about recognizing that the problems themselves were often a distorted creation of the mind. Integrative Analysis and Implications. The overarching revelation from this exploration of emotional distress is both profound and empowering. Our minds possess an extraordinary capacity not only to create suffering, but also to systematically dismantle it. The cognitive model challenges traditional views by asserting that our moods are not external forces, but rather direct manifestations of our thoughts and beliefs. This fundamentally reframes depression, anxiety, guilt, and anger not as inherent flaws or immutable conditions, but as consequences of distorted thinking, a kind of mental static that can be identified, challenged, and ultimately corrected. The implication is that true emotional mastery is an achievable skill, accessible through conscious effort and the application of specific, evidence-based techniques. The book's commentary on the mind-body problem is particularly insightful, bridging a historical divide. It highlights how both psychological interventions, like cognitive therapy, and biological treatments, such as medication, can exert remarkably similar effects on brain function, altering neural activity and restoring balance. This suggests that the brain is not simply a passive recipient of chemical inputs, but a dynamic organ capable of being reshaped by conscious thought and behavioral change. Consequently, the rigid segregation of treatment approaches, either drugs or therapy, is revealed as an artificial construct. Instead, an integrated perspective emerges, advocating for a complementary application, where medication might provide initial relief, enabling an individual to engage more effectively with psychotherapy, or where therapy alone can achieve lasting, structural, and functional changes in the brain. The patient's preferences, the severity of their condition, and their active engagement are underscored as crucial determinants of success, moving beyond a passive cure to active self-management. Regarding medication, the commentary offers a balanced, consumer-oriented guide, demystifying the often complex world of antidepressant and mood-stabilizing drugs. It cautions against the misconception that higher cost equates to superior efficacy, noting that older, generic options can be equally potent. Crucially, it emphasizes that while drugs can be effective for some, they are not a panacea and often yield the most robust long-term outcomes when combined with psychotherapy. Misconceptions about addiction, safety, or the idea that medication diminishes one's true self are debunked, promoting informed choice and reducing stigma. The discussion on dosages, side effects, and particularly dangerous drug interactions serves as a vital call to vigilance, empowering patients to be active collaborators with their healthcare providers, maintaining comprehensive medication lists, and asking critical questions. The often observed practice of polypharmacy is approached with skepticism, suggesting that judicious application and a robust engagement with self-help techniques often yield more enduring and holistic results than relying solely on multiple prescriptions. Ultimately, the profound implication of this cognitive framework extends beyond mere symptom relief to fostering a deep and lasting personal resilience. By recognizing that suffering is often a construct of distorted thought, individuals are empowered to take responsibility for their internal experiences. The journey from feeling good to getting better involves not just the alleviation of pain, but the systematic identification and challenging of the silent assumptions, the approval addiction, the love addiction, the achievement trap, perfectionism that predispose one to future emotional turbulence. It culminates in the understanding that intrinsic self-worth is not earned, but simply is, liberating energy from a relentless pursuit of external validation and redirecting it towards genuine self-care, empathy, and meaningful engagement with life. This pathway to emotional enlightenment is not about achieving constant bliss, but about cultivating the tools to navigate life's inevitable challenges with clarity, compassion, and an unshakable sense of one's own inherent value. Actionable exercises. 1. Challenge your inner critic with the triple column technique. Your moods are a direct reflection of your thoughts. When depression casts its shadow, your mind often gets caught in a loop of negative, self-defeating thoughts that erode your self-esteem and paralyze your will. You can learn to actively talk back to this internal critic and regain control of your emotional state. Grab a notebook and draw 3 columns. For the next few days, whenever you notice a negative or upsetting thought about yourself, an event, or the future, immediately jot it down in the first column, automatic negative thought. Next, in the second column, identify the specific cognitive distortion at play, e.g., all or nothing thinking, overgeneralization, labeling yourself. Finally, in the third column, write a rational response, a realistic, objective rebuttal to your negative thought. This isn't about forced positivity. It's about uncovering the truth. Before and after each entry, note how upset you feel on a scale of 0 to 100%. You'll likely observe a significant drop in your distress as you bring logic to your distorted thinking. Chapter 2. Activate your day with the daily activity schedule. When you're feeling down, the motivation to do anything often vanishes, leading to do-nothingism that only deepens feelings of inadequacy. The secret is to understand that action often precedes motivation. You don't wait to feel like doing something, you start doing, and motivation often follows. Begin by planning your day hour by hour. Even small tasks like make coffee, read one page, or take a 10-minute walk are valuable. Write down what you intend to do for each hour. As you complete each activity, mark it with an M for mastery if you accomplished something, and a P for pleasure if you enjoyed it. Don't let perfectionism stop you. Just engaging in the activity counts. This simple schedule helps you combat indecision, provides tangible evidence of your accomplishments, and challenges the belief that you're incapable. You'll begin to build momentum, discover hidden sources of satisfaction, and break free from the paralysis of inaction. 3. Practice verbal judo against criticism. The fear of criticism can be paralyzing, often triggering a flood of self-critical thoughts. Learn to handle disapproval with grace and self-confidence, turning potential conflict into understanding. This technique helps you maintain your self-esteem, knowing that your worth isn't contingent on others' opinions. When someone criticizes you, use verbal judo in 3 steps. 1. Empathy. Avoid defensiveness. Ask specific questions to understand exactly what they mean. What about my actions gave you that impression? Or, can you give me an example? This shows you're listening and helps clarify their perspective. 2. Disarm the critic. Find a way to agree with them, even if only in principle or by acknowledging a grain of truth. You're right, I could have handled that differently, or I understand why you'd be upset from your point of view. This diffuses hostility and invites a more reasonable discussion. 3. Feedback and negotiation. Only after listening and disarming, tactfully explain your position or emotions. If there's a misunderstanding, clarify it objectively. If you made a mistake, admit it and suggest a resolution. This process empowers you to address the situation constructively without letting criticism damage your self-worth. 4. Unmask your twisted thinking. Spot cognitive distortions. Depression thrives on distorted perceptions, making you view yourself and the world through a gloomy, inaccurate filter. By learning to identify these cognitive distortions, you can begin to expose their illogic and reduce their power over your emotions. This is a powerful step towards regaining mental clarity. Familiarize yourself with common thinking traps like all-or-nothing thinking, seeing things in extremes, overgeneralization, concluding one negative event means perpetual defeat, mental filter, dwelling solely on the negative, jumping to conclusions, mind reading or fortune telling, and magnification/minimization, blowing things up or shrinking positives. For the next week, become a thought detective. Pay close attention to your automatic negative thoughts throughout the day. When you catch yourself thinking something upsetting, pause and ask, which of these distortions am I using right now? Simply identifying the distortion can loosen its grip. Keep a mental or written tally and challenge yourself to find at least one distortion each day. This practice builds awareness and weakens the habit of believing your distorted thoughts as absolute truth. 5. Dig deep. Uncover your silent assumptions with the vertical arrow method. While challenging surface-level negative thoughts helps immediately, truly lasting change comes from unearthing the deeper, silent assumptions that often cause depression and make you vulnerable to relapse. These are the hidden rules you live by that dictate your self-worth. Choose an upsetting automatic thought that you've been working on, even one that seems minor. Instead of immediately challenging its validity, imagine for a moment that it is completely true. Now ask yourself, if this were actually true, what would it mean to me? Why would it be so upsetting? Write down your answer. Then take that answer and ask the question again. And if that were true, what would it mean to me? Why would that be upsetting? Continue this vertical arrow process, repeatedly asking, what would that mean to me? Or, why would that be upsetting? To each subsequent answer. You will eventually trace the chain of thoughts down to a core belief or silent assumption about your worth, safety, or future. E.g., my worth as a human being is proportional to what I've achieved. Once you expose these deep-seated, often illogical assumptions, you can systematically challenge and replace them with a more rational, self-enhancing philosophy for lasting emotional freedom. That wraps up our exploration of today's book. If even one idea here gave you something to reflect on, give it a like so YouTube knows to share more with you. And if you'd like the next insight in your feed, hit subscribe. Remember, what you heard today is our independent interpretation, enriched with analysis and exercises. The full book has far more depth, so consider reading it to experience the author's work directly. Thanks for listening to DeftU Insights, where we turn great books into tools for growth.